Hello everyone and welcome to episode 39 of the Layton Fitness podcast. Now in the previous episode I was discussing protein myths and therefore I thought it would be a good idea to discuss carbohydrate myths this week. So I've got 4 individual topics I'm going to discuss in a reasonable amount of detail. And as I discussed last week, the purpose of these myths is almost to realise some of the things that you're probably already doing just aren't necessary. So last week with regards to protein, I was discussing protein timing, how it's not quite as important within the context of just training once per day. Timing is not as important. And in today's episode when we're discussing carbohydrates, pretty much all of the myths you'll just realise there's certain things you're doing which just aren't necessary. Especially within the context of meal frequency, timing, these specific factors can really make things that much more stressful with your life. So first of all, let's discuss carbohydrate timing. So similar to the protein point last week, unless you're endurance training twice per day within an 8-hour period, timing of carbohydrates between session 1 and session 2 would be very important within that context. However, the majority of people who are listening to this podcast are going to be training once per day and they're going to be doing weight training, which is nowhere near as glycogen depleting as endurance training. As such, let your preference dictate where your carbohydrate meals fall. And as a result, as long as you're meeting that total carbohydrate requirement by the end of the day, glycogen resynthesis will take care of itself at the 24-hour mark. So more than likely your next session may be the next day or the day after. As such, glycogen resynthesis is going to take care of itself with the caveat you hit that total carbohydrate figure. However, if you're training twice per day and you're endurance training, timing is much more important, especially between session 1 and session 2. Now, another quick point I wanted to make, because I know there'll be a few people listening and they'll be probably raising the question, what about raising insulin after a training session? Now it's important to note that protein is also insulinogenic. So as I discussed in a huge amount of detail in one of my previous episodes where I was discussing post-workout nutrition, it's also important to consider there's a pre-exercise meal consumed 1 to 2 hours prior to training containing at least protein. Insulin levels will be above fasting levels during the session and after the session itself. So to say that you need to have carbohydrates post-workout is a moot point within that context. Now, because you'll be hitting that total protein carbohydrate requirement by the end of the day, more than likely some carbohydrates will fill within that post-workout area. So hopefully that makes sense, but ultimately let your preference dictate timings within the context of training once per day. Now another point I want to discuss is carbohydrate types. So you'll probably hear people recommending different carbohydrates in and around their training and at other times of the day. And the common misconception is trying to fit high glycemic carbohydrates after training and then consuming low GI carbohydrates during the rest of the day. Now again, it depends on the context. If you're training twice per day, speed of glycogen resynthesis is very important within that individual's goals. However, people that are listening to this podcast, weight training once per day, again, glycogen resynthesis can take care of itself regardless of carbohydrate type. As such, let your preference dictate whether you have low GI or high GI carbohydrates in and around your training. In addition to that, it's important to know the glycemic index. It's important to note how they actually perform the studies. They actually perform the studies by giving a person a isolation carbohydrate after an overnight fast. Again, this just doesn't relate to real life, i.e. most people will be having their carbohydrate with a protein source, with a fat source, and probably some fibrous vegetables as well, and this just blunts the glycemic response massively. In addition to that, it's important to note that there's always an overlap of nutrients being absorbed from previous meals. So therefore, after meal 1, there's always going to be nutrients absorbed from previous meals. So those 2 points alone just blunt that glycemic response massively. As a result, splitting hairs over having a high GI carbohydrate post-workout or a low GI one, within the context of you're just training once per day, just let your preference dictate what you consume. So hopefully that makes sense. The final point I want to discuss, you hear lots of people in the fitness industry and they love this word, clean food, clean carbs, and I discussed this in detail on episode 1. And ultimately, this is just a misinterpretation of fat loss. So the point they make is just eat clean carbs or just eat clean food and you'll get lean. Now this just completely ignores context and it completely ignores total calories and macronutrients. So the point I'd make is you can still overconsume quote-unquote clean food, and we'll just say clean food is single ingredient whole food. You can still overconsume all of these various foods, and as a result you can still get fat. So you consumed 1,000 grams of carbohydrates from sweet potato, and as a result you're in an energy surplus. Over a period of time, if you did that every single day, you're going to gain body fat. So this misinterpretation of just eat clean food is just so informed. You need to get this out of your head. You need to start tracking your food intake and actually understanding the absolute macronutrients and calories with all these foods. Now with that being said, I still suggest the majority of your food intake does come from whole food, because this will prevent any micronutrient deficiencies, this will keep fibre nice and high, it's generally more satiating. As a result, adherence will be higher. But another side note, clean eaters can also have micronutrient deficiencies, just like if it fits your macro eaters can as well. The reason being, if they just have a small set of foods they consume all the time, they can be just as likely to be deficient in certain nutrients as the if it fits your macros eaters. Therefore, let your preference dictate the sources you're consuming, and trying to have a variety of sources is always going to be in your best interest. But at the same time, you can still fit a small amount of indulgences in there as well, with the caveat you're still meeting your total calorie, carbohydrate, fat and protein targets by the end of the day. So hopefully you found this useful. Like I said, with the Protein Myths podcast, the goal of this is realising just some of the things you're doing that are just not necessary. Some of the things you're really stressing out over just aren't worth stressing out over. So hopefully you enjoyed this. I'll look forward to speaking to you next week. If you're still yet to download my free ebook, How to Set Up a Nutrition Plan, if you go to James Layton, Layton and fitness.co.uk, you can download that immediately. You can see the rest of my podcast on iTunes. I've got loads more content on my website with over 100 videos, and you can also learn more about me and my services and products I offer on there as well. So I look forward to speaking to you next week. Take care. Thank you very much.